Welcome to Moments with Marianne. I'm so delighted we're spending this time here today. We have a very inspiring show coming right up. Now, can traveling the world awaken your soul and give your life balance? Our first special guest today is Tracey Carisch, and she's here to share with us just that. Her new book, Excess Baggage: One Family's Around the World Search for Balance, is a must-read book. Now, Tracey is an award-winning author, professional speaker, and leadership development consultant. Her presentations challenge audiences to embrace change and find the opportunities in life's difficult situations. Her book, Excess Baggage, chronicles a family's around-the-world journey where they shed the stress of their busy, overscheduled life and found balance through the lessons of international travel. So let's welcome to the show, Tracey Carisch.
Thank you so much.
What an honor it is to have you here. And my goodness, your book is quite an adventure.
Yeah, it was.
Well, and before we get started diving into your book, I would love for you to share with our listeners just the inspiration behind writing this, because I know books are such a journey. And to put all this down, what inspired you to do that?
So we had this adventure, and we had a travel blog that got quite a big following. It hadn't really occurred to me to turn this into a book until we were in our very last country of the trip. And a friend of mine, we had, because we're closer to the U.S., we had some friends and family that were coming down to visit us in Nicaragua. And a friend of mine said, "So when are you going to start writing the book?" And I kind of laughed, and she's like, "I'm serious. You need to turn this into a book." And I said to her, "Who wants to read a book about, some frazzled working mom and her neuroses and her journey to, finding herself?" And she's like, "I would." And so we kind of had this conversation, but I didn't take it seriously. And strangely enough, so we're living in this house for a month. And the first day we were there, I'm a big reader, and it had a bookshelf. And I went to the bookshelf, and every single one was in Spanish. And so I was like, all right, I'm not good enough to read a novel in Spanish. My Spanish is okay. So I kind of disregarded it. And it was so ironic because 2 days after she left, I passed by that bookshelf and something caught my eye. And it was Eat, Pray, Love by Elizabeth Gilbert. Oh. And I pulled it off the shelf. I'm like, this wasn't here before. And I'd read it years ago when it first came out and really enjoyed the book. And I started reading it again. I'm like, well, this is about a woman and her neuroses and how she kind of comes to find balance and truth in her life. And so that was a little bit, for me, not thinking, I'm not going to have that kind of, Elizabeth Gilbert level of success, but it was like, I benefited from reading her book. Mm-hmm. So if I could write a book that even, a few people read and really connect to and relate to, and it has meaning for them, then it's worth it. And I'll tell you what was really fascinating. I wrote the book. We spent 18 months traveling as a family. And then we came back, we settled into the United States again. And then it took me about 18 months to write the book. And I really think that if I hadn't done that, I don't know that those lessons and the changes in me from that journey would have really stuck. But because I was constantly going back to it and really being in the trip, but being in it while living in the modern, busy family-based American society, because of that, it's just like it crystallized all those lessons learned and really made me think about, okay, how do we sustain this? And so I think that 3-year period, all of it was needed. If I'd only gone on the trip, or if I'd only written a book, I don't know if I would have become the person I am today.
Well, it's really interesting because your book is, I think, a journey that a lot of women, a lot of families can relate to, because we get to this point where we feel like we've accomplished X amount. I know you kind of talk about how you wanted to be a CEO, growing up, what every child dreams about, right? Mm-hmm. But you had some very high aspirations, and there's a lot of work that goes into doing, getting to a certain place in life. And then we get there, we're like, why am I here? I don't even feel like I'm living my own life.
Yeah, that's what I loved when the title of your show, Moments with Marianne, like that, for me, it was this moment. And I talk about it in the first chapter where all of a sudden I realized this is just a blur of things I have to do. And I thought that I'd reached this level of success that we define. You work your way up that ladder, and you have these goals that you've accomplished. And yet in that moment, it was literally just a flash of insight and clarity that this is not really cracked up to what I thought it was going to be. and so we have, how do we make a change and find it? And for us, that was this kind of crazy journey with our kids around the world. But I think about that, and it really was always in me. It was just, how do I unlock it? And one of the things I now believe, and I didn't at that moment, I'm having this moment of conflict, my midlife crisis, and it feels very bad and uncomfortable. But I really think that those moments of conflict, those feelings of discomfort, it's our higher self trying to get our attention, tapping us on the shoulder saying, hey, here's something that's not working for you, and you can ignore it, but it's going to catch up with you. So you need to look at this. And that's what that moment was for me. It was a time to really look at this dissatisfaction I was feeling with everything that I'd actually wanted to bring into my life. So I think that, that disconnect, we set these goals, and we have to be willing to realize that, you know what, these were fine and this got me where I am, but now it's time for something different. And it's time to pivot in whatever way makes the most sense for me as a person.
Well, and why don't you share with our listeners about your career? Because I think, when people hear about this, it sounds like a career that a lot of people would strive to obtain in their lifetime.
Yeah, I started off in technology. My husband and I both were, computer science people in college, and came out in the late 90s. And that was a time when if you had that degree, you were in high demand, and just had some lucky breaks where I got promoted. And next thing I know, I'm, meeting with, our governor's offices and talking with, people at the federal level about STEM education and workforce development, and speaking at conferences, and, really had created what I thought, like this, I had flexibility in my job. I was able to make my own schedule. I was meeting with really important people. It was like, there is nothing here that should feel uncomfortable. It was really, and the other piece of this, when people hear what we did, they're like, oh, well, you must have been like world travelers your whole lives. And this was not the case. I think I took a couple trips when I was young to Florida and Colorado when I was a little kid, and had never been out of the country until I was like 27 years old, when my husband and I went to Europe for, a couple weeks. And this thing we did was just so drastic. From the people we were very focused and career oriented, and it was definitely a break from who we'd been up to that point.
Was it difficult in getting the family on board with this type of a trip, or is it something that as a family you came together and said, hey, let's do this?
Our daughters were 10, 7, and 5 when we left. And so it was definitely that age where they were like, okay, they weren't real resistant to anything. Although I talk about this a little bit in the book, like I definitely started realizing like, oh, okay, maybe they're having some anxiety around this big change. But yeah, we came around it really quickly. Luckily, Brian and I started having big conversations and decided to do this crazy thing. What I've realized is that now, we have 3 daughters who are much older. So they're now 15, 12, and 10. And they'll even say now, like, when are we going to leave the country again? And so if we really wanted to do this again, it's like we've broken them into that type of life or whatever. So it was a really easy decision for us at that time. I think, if we tried to do something like that now with kids that had never experienced it before, they might have a harder time at this age.
Mm-hmm. Well, I understand you have 2 dogs and a cat as well. Yeah. So did Wild Kingdom travel with you?
No, we actually have amazing, I have in-laws that watched our pets. The cat is a new addition to the family since we've been back in the United States, but we did have the 2 dogs, and they stayed with the grandparents while we were traveling, and actually had a great time. It was funny though, when we came back, we kind of thought, are they going to remember us? It's been a year and a half since we've seen these animals, and they went nuts. Like they absolutely knew who we were and were just going crazy. We have a video of it, and I pull it up once in a while. It's just such a sweet moment.
Well, they love the in-laws, but definitely love to be with their family. So,
yeah.
Oh, well, and how do you think this trip has really not only changed your perspective, but that of your families?
It's interesting. I do a lot of talks, and I get that question a lot, and it's really this perspective on what is truly important, and it's not instantaneous. I mean, I find myself sometimes, getting worked up about some little thing that's happening or some little problem that's come up, or thinking I need to get my kid in this activity or they're going to be left behind. And then we're able to settle back into those lessons that we learned. Some of the big ones that I talk about were how important it is to really collect our stories instead of stuff. How do we spend our money and our time and our focus on those experiences that will live with us forever, instead of a thing that is going to eventually break or not be what we wanted. The other one that we talk about is really, especially with raising our kids, focusing on happiness instead of this, I'm using air quotes, success. This predefined notion of success that we as parents like, okay, well, I need to get them in this activity so they know teamwork, and they need to play an instrument because that helps with it. And you wind up running yourself ragged around all these things that you think are preparing your kids for success in the future. And one of the things we learned as we were traveling, we were in a lot of developing countries, and what we saw were people that were living in very severe poverty and had very little. And yet they were happier than our American friends, than we were, living in the United States. And it was this moment of understanding that happiness is right now. If I'm not happy right now, then I'm sacrificing something very important to life. And while we can say that running our kids around and kind of having that crazy schedule that we had before we left is worth it because it's going to lead to success, really, if we're happy right now, in my opinion, the success will come. But if we are stressed out and really making choices that are taking away our current happiness, that future success is not guaranteed, and it's not why we're on this planet.
Yeah.
And then finally, I think the last thing that we've taken from that trip is this idea of really, I call it seeing the water, and it's something I talk about in the book, but this idea of acknowledging what we are swimming in, where we've come from, the benefits, the opportunities that we've had, the challenges that we've had as individuals, and acknowledging that we don't know what other people are swimming in. And how do we, this deep empathy that doesn't just apply to somebody who maybe is, having a hard time struggling in life, and we need to, be understanding of that, but it applies even to people who just have different opinions than us. I think one of the things that's really been great for my husband and I, this see the water idea, is in this day and age, we have a very polarized society. We have people that have very different beliefs on things like policy and, certain issues. And yet I know that my water is different from their water. And fundamentally, we are human beings trying to do good in the world. And we might have different ideas of what that looks like. And we came from different places and swam in different water. But if I can see my water, then I can acknowledge their water that's different. And really, then you start to see the person that's there, not the opinions or the decisions or the choices that they make. So that's really been our three big takeaways, is to focus on our experiences, focus on happiness, and just acknowledge that we don't know what other people are swimming in.
Isn't that the truth? And what a great thing for your children to learn so early in life. I mean, they have so much of a head start, I think, in many ways when it comes to what really matters about life in general.
Yeah. And it's funny too, I'll hear, my 15-year-old, I've got kids in the car and they'll be talking about some thing that happened. And my 15-year-old will be like, you guys, this doesn't matter. It's all big picture, big picture. And I'm like, that is exactly what I wish I'd had in my head when I was 15.
Oh my gosh, that's too funny. Well, in your book, you have this whole chapter that's called Spiritual Failure. And I love this chapter because I think this is how people feel. I mean, you talk about the attempts at meditating, declarations at meditations, a bunch of hooey. I mean, I think everyone goes through this kind of thing. Like, you throw if there's a book on how to meditate, everyone's thrown that against the wall.
Right, right. And that was, what I acknowledged in that was, I don't know, we feel even something like, I'm going to be more spiritual. We determine if we're successful at that or not, that.
Yeah.
What I realized that happened in Thailand. And then the very next country we went to was Cambodia. And that chapter is called Spiritual Success. And it was kind of, it's about the journey. And that when you can see that, the failures that you're having are actually contributing to what will eventually be that, the moment that something clicks, no matter what you're doing, whether it's I'm trying to meditate or I'm, trying to learn a new sport, the journey is the process. And that frustration that we feel is there for a very good purpose. And when we were in Thailand and I was feeling like, okay, this is 2 steps forward, 1 step back, that is what our spiritual journey is. It's always 2 steps forward, 1 step back. I think the most I was listening to Pema Chodron, who's this American Tibetan monk, and she has these great talks that she does, and she's a grandmother, and she's talking about how one day she's babysitting her granddaughter. She kind of has this moment of frustration and she's yelling at her granddaughter, and she says to the granddaughter, so let's not tell people about that because grandma is a spiritual leader and people expect something better of me. And even somebody like that who is so evolved and out in the world helping other people evolve, even she has these moments of 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And so that's what I always acknowledge because of that spiritual failure, is that yes, this is supposed to be this kind of journey. And when you have those moments where you're feeling selfish or just vengeful or jealous, these are all emotions that are there for purpose, to get our attention, and we look at them and we use them to be better. We don't admonish ourselves for feeling them. So yeah, spiritual failure, I think, was a very important process always. It doesn't really ever go away.
Well, and it's interesting because I think that people, regardless if they are just living their daily lives or doing something as extreme as your family did, where you traveled around the world, it's having that spiritual failure is something that we all come up against. If it's our meditation practice, if it's, maybe we're not being as nice as we'd like to be, maybe we're tailgating people and, in traffic. I mean, there's so many ways that we can make adjustments, within our own spiritual walk. And, I love how you have kind of put that out there. Like, hey, it wasn't easy. There was a failure, but also there's success to it as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think in those moments, going back to that idea, conflict or those negative feelings we have are there to get our attention. And one of the, anytime I'm having that moment of, this idiot in front of me when I'm driving or whatever, it's like, okay, why am I at this place right now? Why am I really angry? And a lot of times what I wind up realizing is, okay, when I ask the why, I get to, this is not about the person in front of me. This is about the fact that something else happened earlier in the day and I wasn't maybe authentic and I didn't speak my truth, or it's really about something else. And so if we can take those moments where we're frustrated and not being our best selves, and instead ask ourselves, well, why is this happening? And what am I supposed to get out of this? One of the things that I say as my mantra is, how is this serving me? How is this serving me right now? Whatever is happening. And if I can get to the why behind it, it's usually, then it becomes this moment of, lesson learned or something I'm very grateful for, instead of feeling frustration or feeling guilty about it.
How was it? Because I know your book is called Excess Baggage, and you talk about learning to live without that. How was that journey of getting rid of everything? I know sometimes people have a really hard time with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was interesting, that whole process, just getting, because we sold everything. We had one 8-foot storage unit of stuff that we kept that was, a lot of memorabilia or bikes, things that we knew we wanted to keep long term. But I mean, 8 feet is not much space. And so
Not
you
at
really
all.
had to look at something and hold it and be like, does this bring me joy? Like, is this really something that I want to have in my life? And most of the time the answer was no. And I've kept that up. In fact, I was watching a show that was about kind of tidying up, the art of tidying up or something. And that was the exact question that they would ask. Hold the piece of clothing or hold the knickknack or whatever it is and be like, is this really bringing me joy in life? And if the answer is no, let it go. And that was that whole process, I wouldn't call it minimalism because I mean, we still have stuff, we still have a home and things in it. And I like my plants and, certain knickknacks, but if it's not bringing me joy, then I need to let it go. And that was practiced a lot when we were leaving for this journey, for sure.
Did your children have a easy time with that, or was it difficult for them?
I think it was different, so my older two daughters didn't really, they had a few things they wanted to keep, and we let them keep whatever they wanted to keep. But they were very much like, I don't need that. I don't need that. I don't need that. My youngest, though, it was interesting. And I talk about this in the book. She wanted to keep everything. And it was just the way that she was coping with this change, that she would know, like, okay, well, that pair of pants that I really liked is sitting for me somewhere in the, back in the United States. And, she was 5 when we were leaving. And I think that was her way of dealing with the trip itself, was to hold on to things that maybe, and then certainly we came back and, we were throwing away a lot of stuff or giving it away. But everybody has their coping mechanism, and that was hers.
Yeah. What do you think for yourself was the most memorable part of your trip?
So we were sitting in Cambodia, in the temples of Cambodia. They have all these, banyan trees that have these big vines. And I remember, it's like it was yesterday. I'm looking at my girls and they're swinging on these vines like they're swing sets. And I had this flashback to when my husband and I were young and we were getting ready. We're saving up for this backpacking excursion. We'd never been out of the country. We decided this is what we're going to do before we really settle down and have kids. And then it turned out we were expecting a baby kind of unexpectedly. And so that all changed. And it was, while we were very excited to, be having a baby, it was also this feeling of disappointment that we'd lost this journey that we were going to take together. And when we were in Cambodia and I was watching those kids swing on that vine, I realized that was all in order. We were supposed to do this as a family. If we'd done it alone, just the two of us, maybe we would have kind of, sowed that wild oat for travel and we would have let it go and we never would have done this. And yet we were supposed to do this as a family. And so that was kind of the most poignant moment for me. The world's in order. We just have to kind of live in that space. With hindsight, we always say, we look back on things, we're like, oh, that worked out well. Even though I was disappointed at the time, it all worked out because, and then, all the good things that wound up happening. That living in hindsight was this idea that happened when I was sitting there watching those kids swing. It was like we needed them with us in order to have the trip we were supposed to have and to give them the experience as well.
I'm sure they're excited, like you were saying, about the next ones. Like, hey, when are we leaving? Yeah.
Right. Yeah, they've definitely, I think the great thing for kids is, even with brain development, it's just like change. They like to see, their brains like to see new things and experience new things, even though that can be a little scary. And so that ability to know I'm going to go into this new situation, this new country, this new home for the next month, and I'm going to come out the other side and it's going to be okay. That is really shaped who they are. That is, as things come up in life, they know, what, this is all going to work out because it did over and over and over again when we were traveling.
It seems to have given them not only a new perspective, but a great deal of self-awareness and courage as they go on their own path.
Yeah, I think so. It's also, as a family, I really encourage families, even 2 weeks, get away together for 2 weeks, because somewhere around the 7-day mark, I don't know, it's the politeness goes away. You kind of get sick of each other. And then you start to really see parts of those people you thought you knew so well in a different way. And that's what we noticed when we were traveling, was we kind of we were at each other's throats. We were around each other constantly. But that extended period of time, I don't know. I know my kids at a different level, and they're willing to confide in us in ways that I don't remember ever confiding in my own parents growing up, So I think that just extended time together kind of helps with that relationship.
Well, what do you think your family has in store next? Because I'm sure you have another great adventure in the works.
Well, I mean, honestly, I think our kids, we love our community and we love where we live. Our kids are involved in a lot of things that they really enjoy and that are, I think, shaping who they're meant to become as much as this trip did. So we do have plans to try to figure out a way to do an extended trip, like maybe 2 or 3 months. But I don't know. I think sometimes the adventure is in normal life, our extraordinary, ordinary lives. There's a wonderful movie I just watched on Netflix called About Time. And at the end, the main character has a voiceover and he says, we're all traveling through time together on this adventure. And that's what it feels like. We had that crazy adventure, but I think that there's something really special and unique and valuable in seeing every day as, the opportunity. It's bringing us, our little realities are bringing us situations that will help us grow and help us become the people we're supposed to be. So I don't know that our family will ever do some big, crazy adventure again. I think we'll take those lessons and we'll kind of settle into the extraordinary, ordinary.
Well, hey, and it sounds like there's a whole new perspective for that and for that part of the journey. There's appreciation for what happens every day, and not that I'm saying that there wasn't that before, but sometimes we need to have these kind of trips or to get away in order to really gain a perspective of who we are.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. And I think from that, the central theme is just kind of gratitude for, everything we have. We're, in this country that we're, lucky to live in, and the conveniences and comforts that we have. There's gratitude for that where there wasn't before. But there's also gratitude for, even those frustrations and conflicts that come up. I used to see anything that was a problem presented as now what? This is something I have to deal with. And instead, it's like, here's something I have the opportunity to learn from. Mm-hmm. And that gratitude is really a big shift for us.
So do you guys have an overbooked schedule now?
No. It's really, we kind of have the rule, like, you pick one thing, pick the thing that at any given time, you can have one activity happening. Mm-hmm. And what it's made our kids do is really think about, what am I really passionate about? What do I really want to do? What do I want to spend my time and my parents' money on? And so we have 3 kids, but we don't have the crazy schedule. We have a lot of, we have the long dinners around the table and things that if we were running kids to all these different things, we would be sacrificing it. So we don't have the packed schedule anymore. We called it the blur. The blur was this, almost kind of felt like a monster that would take over our lives and have us running carpools and, stressing out. And we continue to disrupt the blur.
Hey, I think that's a very important part, because I know a couple of people who live in that, where their kids are in like 4 or 5 things each. And so, there's the constant schedule of moving from one event to another. They're exhausted. The kids are exhausted. And at the end of the day, I'm not sure how much benefit is really being derived from any of it.
Yeah, I was having a women's group I was having a conversation with, and, it was kind of like we're outsourcing our parenting almost. We're saying, okay, well, this coach and this teacher and all these different people need to contribute, and that's great. But we're sacrificing that time and the influence that we have on our children. And I think that while it feels like these are all opportunities, and like I said, it's going to lead to success in the future, we also have to look at the flip side. Well, what are we giving up? Because there is a real cost to that schedule and to all those activities and to the time that those other people get to spend with our kids that we don't get to spend with them. Mm-hmm. And so I challenge families to really look at that and even like add it up, do the math and look at how much time are you getting to spend quality time with your kids in a week versus all the other people that you're, shipping them out to. And sometimes it's pretty shocking.
I bet it is. I mean, you look at it, it's like, wow, these, they can kind of become this monster and take a life of their own.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, Tracey, where can our listeners connect with you and learn not only about your book, Excess Baggage, but how to be part of your community?
So I do have my website, which is TraceyCarisch.com, just my name. And I always encourage people just to reach out to me on Gmail, my Gmail account. So it's TraceyCarisch@gmail.com. And just email me. People will email me the greatest, how they've related to the book or their own experiences. And really have built this community. I do a lot of speaking engagements around the country. And so I've interfaced with people on my website and then via email. And then next thing I know, I'm getting to meet them because I'm in their town doing a book event or doing a speaking engagement. And what I love about this book and the effect that it's had on my life is that connection to people and their stories and the lessons they've learned that have enriched. I mean, it enriches my life so much. And so I love to connect with people who have read it or just want to have a conversation around, the life that we live and how do we use conflict as opportunity and have that gratitude for even the things that feel frustrating. That is a conversation that comes up a lot. And then how do we evaluate our lives and really pick the things that are bringing us joy? So love to connect with people. They can email me, they can visit my website, or I can even show up in their town.
Yeah, that all sounds like those are good options. Tracey, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Thank you. It's been such a pleasure.
Well, thank you, Tracey. It's been such an honor to spend this time with you and, of course, to talk about your new book, Excess Baggage, One Family's Around the World Search for Balance. Excess Baggage is available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all indie retailers. We're going to pause here for a quick break. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne. We'll be right back after these messages.
Internationally recognized and award-winning author Judy Goodman works and teaches outside the box of limited thinking. Working with people from every walk of life, her goal is to empower you to be the best you can be, no matter what the challenge is. Born with the gift of seeing beyond our normal vision, she has an extraordinary gift of working with every challenge. Teaching beyond conventional wisdom, her work is described as life-changing. Visit judygoodman.com. That's judygoodman.com.
There comes a moment when you realize you're somewhere special, when you discover that each beautiful creature that you see has been rescued from a life of absolute horror and brought to this incredibly free place. Here's where their lives were forever changed and where yours will as well. Discover over 500 tigers, bears, and lions at the brand new visitor center at the Wild Animal Sanctuary just outside Denver. For more information, visit wildanimalsanctuary.org. Discover true freedom at the Wild Animal Sanctuary.
There are nearly 2 million Americans living with amputation. Many live right here in San Antonio. Becoming an amputee can be scary, frustrating, isolating, but there's no reason to feel alone. The San Antonio Amputee Foundation is here to help support you and guide you toward resources such as home and car modifications and even prosthetic limbs. For more information or to make a donation, visit saamputee.org. We'll help you live a full, active life, one step at a time. San Antonio Amputee Foundation, healing limbs, hearts, and souls.
If not me, then who? This ethos is driving the Travis Manion Foundation to empower veterans and families of fallen heroes to develop character in future generations. In 2007, Marine First Lieutenant Travis Manion was killed in Iraq while saving his wounded teammates. Travis's legacy lives on in the 5 words he spoke before leaving for his final deployment. If not me, then who? Guided by this mantra, veterans continue their service, developing strong relationships in the community, and thrive in their post-military lives. Visit TravisManion.org and ensure the character of our nation's heroes lives on in the next generation. If not me, then who?
Welcome back to Moments with Marianne. We're here with our next special guest, Kayce Stevens Hughlett, and she's here to share with us her new book, SoulStroller, Experiencing the Weight, Whispers, and Wings of the World. So Kayce is a healer and an artist who believes in everyday magic and that complex issues often call for simple practices. She holds a master's in counseling psychology from the Seattle School of Theology and Psychology, and she's a certified Martha Beck life coach. Kayce began her work as an accountant for a multinational firm and transitioned to the healing arts when the harsh circumstances of life sent her searching for the answers on a less linear plane. So let's welcome to the show, Kayce Stevens Hughlett.
Thanks so much, Marianne. It's great to be here.
What an honor it is to have you here and to talk about your new book. I hear it's getting some really great reviews.
It is. It's very exciting. It's won a couple of awards, and which is thrilling for any author. And yeah.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
And I have to ask, what inspired you to write this book? Because it's quite a book.
That's such a great question, and I wish I could answer it succinctly. But what happened was this story about journey and voice became a whole journey in and of itself. I really thought I was going to share some of my travels around the world and how that has been a pivotal growth point for me in terms of both personal development and how I see the world, how I interact with the world. And so the story, though, became so much more about places, which some of them include Paris and Egypt is in there, Ireland, Italy, some really fun detours. And what happened was a bigger portion of my story needed to come in, which was actually this healing and claiming of my voice as a woman, as a person in the world, as someone who had been raised to be the good girl and abide by everybody else's rules. And so what I ended up doing was kind of breaking rules as I wrote the book, and it grew, and then it shrunk, and then it morphed, and so that it was a long time coming. I actually thought it was going to be my first book, and it happens to be my third one. So I needed to do a few things along the way, I think, to get to the place where this was ready for the world.
Well, and so how did your background and your spiritual training help you in developing your book and your methodology?
Right. It was so as anyone who, steps into the book at all understands, I started as an accountant and so a very, very structured thing. And, everything added up. And in my 30s and 40s, as I became a parent, I realized I was not on the right path. And so later in life, actually went back to school and got my master's in counseling psychology with an emphasis in spiritual direction and spiritual community. And so the methodology, this idea of soul strolling, what it means to be a soul stroller, really developed out of this place of being present to the world, being present to myself, that internal. I don't know about you, Marianne, but I have a lot of chatter that happens inside my head during the day.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. And I think most of us do. So I started by learning to be present to that. I noticed how it translated into my ability to be present with other people and listen to the stories, and then noticing how it just continued to translate into this kind of a, I guess, spiritual awakening in terms of seeing the whole world as very vibrant and chatty and in a really delightful way. And so it was really this idea of learning to be quiet and to have a place of deep listening rather than just going through my days automatically with a to-do list, checking things off as I went.
Well, and I love how you started this discussion about finding your voice. And I think for women, getting to a place where we not only find our voice, but we feel that we are powerful and using it in our own unique way in the world can be a big deal.
Yes, yes. And I love that you said in our own unique way, because voice doesn't have to be loud. It doesn't have to be strident. I think, I grew up with this idea of women that were using their voices were loud and obnoxious, and these are not my words. These were kind of stories that were fed to me. And what I'm finding is voice is so much more than being physically heard, audibly heard, that it's learning to turn in and listen to what we, and I'm just going to say as women, but I think men experience this too, but we as women start to listen to ourselves rather than what everyone else is telling us. And that can be other women, that can be the world, that can be these social structures that we see. But there's this quiet, still voice that will guide us through our lives. And it could be as simple as answering for yourself, what do I want for breakfast? And not just going with the standard of this is what I always have. For example, this morning I woke up and I usually have a slow start to my morning and really try to ground in. And I did that this morning, but I also realized I really wanted to get outside and to walk down to my local coffee shop and have a cup of coffee before I started, before I had my breakfast, before I started my day at the morning, before, I got to work. And so that was something different for me to just get up and get dressed and take a walk first thing. And so so voice can be as simple as that, as saying, what do I need in this moment?
Mm-hmm. I agree. I mean, that's so important. And your book really gives women a way of being able to develop that voice and find it. Because, a lot of times finding your voice can be a little bit of a challenge.
Oh, absolutely. I'm still working on it.
Aren't we all?
Yes, absolutely.
Well, and I'd love for you to explain to our listeners, I know this is kind of a loaded question here, so you'll have to just bear with me, but what is a soul stroller?
Okay. I think it's funny because I go back and I look in the book and I read, oh yes, I wrote that. Yes, that's what a soul stroller is. And I think, coming back to this idea of presence and paying attention, this idea of deep listening. And my business partner and I, who created Soul Strolling, Sharon Richards, we started by actually going on trips, and we have taken women to Paris. We've done things around Seattle where we live locally, and it's really this invitation of mindfulness in motion. And we can think about being mindful and think about meditation and these things, and often we're sitting still. Or we have this idea of we're always moving, we're always in motion. Like I said earlier, this idea of a to-do list and kind of automatically going through your day. So a soul stroller comes in between those two things, where you take this idea of mindfulness and presence and what am I noticing? What am I hearing? What am I seeing? It's really sinking into all of your senses and then following, so strolling into those places. And for example, going back to this morning for me, this listening of, oh, what does my stroll look like today? And for me, it was this idea of walking outside, pausing in my garden. We've got some beautiful roses blooming, and stopping for a moment of gratitude and walking down the street, noticing what's around me. And from a place, and it really, I want to say from a place of love. And I don't know if you've noticed, a lot of times we pass people on the street and there's no eye contact. Somebody looks down, they turn away, where we walk very independently and preoccupied. So a soul stroller really brings an intention into their day. Like, I am taking intentional steps. And they can be literal footsteps, or they can be just steps of internal action. How's that?
I think that is perfect, because I know that was kind of a loaded question, because there's a lot that goes into that.
Yes.
I think it allows people to realize that they can be in the present moment and really connect with their soul in a deeper and more profound way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. And as we connect with ourselves, and this is a thing, a lot of times we think, if I'm only focusing on myself, that's selfish, or that's self-centered, or it's isolating. But I have found just the opposite, that as I can understand and notice what's going on for me, I'm connecting in more profound ways with my neighbors, or with the stranger on the street, or the person next to me on the bus, or these kinds of things. And I've noticed how I was in the coffee shop the other day, and I don't spend all my time in coffee shops, but it's a great place to soul stroll. It's a great place to go and pause. But there was a barista that I didn't recognize, and she kind of had a bit of a, stern look on her face. She just, kind of that neutral face. And I noticed I really loved her blouse that she had on. And I just commented, I said, "I love your blouse." Her face lit up. She looked me in the eye. We had this whole exchange that was so different than if I had kind of gotten into my head and thought, well, she's she's grumpy, she's in a bad mood, she's not doing her job, she, whatever those stories. And just a little bit of noticing something about someone, like walking by your neighbor and commenting on the beautiful planter that they have on their front porch, or their dog. And dogs are a great entryway. I mean, don't get me started on that. They're the ultimate soul strollers.
They are.
Yes, they're present to all the smells and the sights and the sounds, and I love that idea. This example of when I talk about finding your internal yes, and this idea of dogs. That way when all of a sudden you see a dog's ears perk up and they've heard something that maybe you didn't hear, and they're so present and so alert to what's going on. That's what yes feels like to me, where it's like, oh, that feels open and inviting and maybe sometimes kind of scary. It's like, that feels a little risky. And in the book, I talk about the first time I decided to go on a trip by myself, and it actually ended up being to Paris. And I had this awakening, and it was just like, I asked myself the question, where would you go if you could go anywhere in the world? And it just popped into my head, Paris. And then I thought, really? And that was like the perking up when you hear that. And the key to soul strolling is following that thread. And I know for all of us, we can't immediately just go buy a ticket to Paris. There's a longer story behind that. But following that thread about what is it that's calling to me? What is it what do I need? And for me, that first trip that I did was as much about needing time on my own and really this space to find my own rhythm, because I was in the midst of motherhood, and I had pretty challenging situations going on. My children have been my greatest teachers and continue to be my greatest teachers. And I was kind of spinning inside. And so I needed some space. And so I started by listening to just those things that I'm drawn to. And that to me is the key of soul strolling, is really just paying attention to things you notice during the day. Right now, I'm noticing pink blossoms everywhere for me. And so I'm just paying attention to what that is. It might just be that they're beautiful, or there might be some other longing, or blooming, blossoming. I don't know. I could play with those things for days, and I have.
Well, and so you talk about the shy girl in your book. What's the shy girl?
Oh gosh. Well, she was the girl that would go on a date and not speak the whole time because she was afraid that she might say something wrong. The one who I hardly recognize her anymore, but the story in my family was that I was the shy girl, and that I had nothing important to say. I was the baby. And if I just listened to what everyone else had to say, that things would be fine. And if you've read the book, and we won't go into that, but I have my own definition of what fine is, and which was a whole bunch of insecurity, a lot of insecurity, and that idea that if I opened my mouth, that it would be wrong, or I would be judged, or the sense of really unworthiness, like nothing of value to say, nothing to add. And I lived that way for many, 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 many years. And, because it was a story that was nurtured as a child for me. And my mother would say, "This is Kayce. She's our shy one. She's our baby." And I didn't have the oomph to say, "I am not." But I could feel this inside going, that just doesn't feel right to me. But the adults in my life that was what they were affirming and confirming for me. So shy was silent. Shy was silent.
Yeah, and there's so many women that really never get a voice at the table, or are told you're the shy one, or this person has nothing of value to add to the discussion, and so women erroneously will believe this, and instead of going, hey, I have something of value to add.
Mm-hmm.
Your book really, in many ways, talks about finding that voice that we've kind of discussed before, but really moving forward with it and being comfortable in life.
Yes. And it's a process. I mean, we don't immediately go from being totally silent to, picking up a microphone and, standing on the stage. I guess some people maybe have done that. We get pushed to the limit, right? And then it's like, enough is enough. And
Yeah.
But yes, it is a process, and that's where I even now, one of my struggles now is I talk to people like you and not people that haven't necessarily read the book, because if you've read the book, you understand what it's taken me to get here. And even I have to laugh because the book is only a fraction of the story, right? Of these struggles and this journey and these places where, even today I'll find myself in a situation where I question my voice because those roots are so deep seated that I can be in a new situation and I'll hear that little voice that goes, "Oh, you can't speak up here. These people know way more than you do." But fortunately, I've developed this compassionate side that says, "Hey, wait a minute. Is that true? Is that true? Do you really not have anything of value to say?" And I know that's not true, that I do have something of value to say. And doesn't mean I say it in every situation. But it's as much as anything of finding that for myself and starting to nurture that. And that was the thing about writing the book. I had to write the book for me. And I when I wrote it, I didn't know if I would publish it. I didn't know if I would give it to my family, a few friends. I just knew I needed to write it. And then what happened was, as some people, some close friends, and then I'm in writing groups, and I would share pieces of it, and people found they were finding themselves in the story. They were finding themselves in my story. And so it became very important to me to have an opportunity to share with other women. And that's always been my idea. Like when I wrote my first book, which I'll do a little plug, it's being re-released through my publisher in this December, and it's 365 daily meditations. And so it was really the precursor to soul strolling. It was me starting to have these conversations, and there are these invitations for people to ask themselves their own questions, and there's little activities and things. But when I was writing that, I didn't know I was writing the book when I wrote that. And because I had a blog from back in the day, and what kept me going through that is, if this book helps one person find more peace, more direction in their life, then it was worth writing.
I would love for you to share with our listeners, because you talk about live your best life. I'd love for you to share with our listeners some tips that they can use today to kind of start doing that.
Yes. So that, again, I think it comes back to some of the things we've already talked about, Marianne, this idea of starting to listen to yourself. One of my favorite tips, because I have taught self-care for a long time. And so I think coming back to self-care and really beginning to give yourself a seat at the table, if that makes sense, because sometimes we just ignore ourselves and we put the children first, or our job first, or everything else first. And so I think living our best lives comes back to really being aware and being present. And it doesn't mean you have to go off on a, trip around the world by yourself to live your best life. It starts with small moments. And really, when we look at our lives, we might have some big events, but usually even in big momentous events, there's a moment in there that we feel really alive, and that sense of joy or peace or calm, whatever that the quality is for you, that just kind of resonates down through your toes and up through the top of your head. You can just feel the whole thing. So I think tip number one is giving yourself space. And I'm talking 1 minute, 3 minutes, 5 minutes. And I think any of us can find that. And music for me is a great way. And so there might be just a song that you love that's empowering or moves you or whatever. And giving yourself the space and the time to maybe sit for 3 minutes with a song, with the intention of, this is for me. This is for me. And for women that have little children, you can invite your children to listen to the song, or you can say 3 minutes for mommy. And we can find 3 minutes in a day. I promise we can find 3 minutes in a day. And it's starting with those incremental steps. And I mean, we've all heard, it's like a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. And so these moments of just saying, maybe it's not even music, sitting down and saying, this moment is for me. And placing your hand over your heart. Maybe you're putting your other hand on your belly, on the center of your being, and breathing into that. Just breathing into that. That, I believe, is the beginning of living your best life. Because we start to string those moments together. And we know that we can come back to those moments. And when we get quiet, we'll start to hear those little prompts, whether it's pink blossoms. and that's another one of my favorite tools, is when something catches your eye, ask what the invitation is from that. Like, I'm sitting here looking at these amazing pink orchids on my desk, and they're almost heavy with blooming and blossoms. And it's like, the message I just heard in my head is, okay, and you can drop a couple of those blossoms. You don't have to hold on to everything. That just came from seeing something I notice, asking what the invitation is, and paying attention.
What a powerful practice that is. My goodness. Well, Kayce, where can our listeners connect with you and be part of your community?
The easiest way to find me is if you can spell my name, which is a little tricky. So I have my website, and it's Kayce, KayceHughlett.com. And everything is really right there. My books are there, my blog's there. You can find me. I hang out social media wise. Instagram is my favorite right now because I'm very much into images, and it's also Kayce at Kayce Hughlett. So if you can spell my name, you can Google me, and you can find my website. You can find my Instagram, and all the ways to connect.
Well, awesome. Well, Kayce, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Thank you, Marianne. It's been a real delight.
Well, thank you, Kayce. It's been such an honor to spend this time with you and, of course, to talk about your new book, SoulStroller. If you'd like to visit Kayce's website, you can at liveitToGiveIt.me. SoulStroller is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and select indie bookstores. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. You're listening to Moments with Marianne. And remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Moments with Marianne airs every Sunday, Monday, Thursday, and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. Pacific Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.